Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people who found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. We are talking today to Mark Wigginton.
I spent some time getting ready for this to understand about commas and semicolons. And a comma is a punctuation mark that separates clauses and joins them together. And a semicolon really brings two related but very different topics together. And I think that's the story of my life. Right? I've had a series of commas through my life, and then I had a major semicolon, a major life-changing moment that changed, the first 45 years of my life and the most recent 20 years of my life. I went to rehab when I was 30. And when I was in rehab, I really started to uncover myself. I was really moved and empowered, and I decided I was going to make a major life change and went back to school and got my master's degree so that I could work as a counselor, work as a therapist. And I worked at rehab centers all over the place. And in my head, I learned a lot about addiction and substance use. And so every day I would be working with people that were relapsing and trying to get back on track and trying to learn and having consequences and work. And that was my daily life for 7 years. And then 7 years in, that was me. I found myself in a place where I relapsed. I can remember as if it was 5 minutes ago that I sat down and I had a beer and I was overwhelmed in my life, and I just was broken when that happened. And I felt like I had betrayed everything that I had learned. Paul, if you relapsed, I would be able to talk you through that. I would be able to help you get back on track. But for me, it wasn't acceptable. It wasn't acceptable to me because it meant that I wasn't perfect. I wouldn't tell anybody about it. I couldn't tell anyone about what was going on. The shame was so deep at having done that. And ultimately it led me to a place where I left that field. I couldn't deal with it. And so I went back into the business world, and I created a life for myself that enabled me to continue on that downward journey. I began working as a consultant on the road, weeks at a time, away from home, away from support system. And so I started job hopping. I'd get angry or something would happen, or I would quit and I would move on to something new. I was literally flying all over the country doing training classes and teaching sales coaching and all these different elements. I weighed about 225 pounds. My life was not working. So I was emotionally exhausted, mentally exhausted. My life was like really out of control. And I was really, really angry and depressed. So I had evolved in this period of time from this person committed to helping other people grow and committing to recovery, to making the same mistake that I had taught people about over and over again, how to get through, but I couldn't do it for me. And I would never have imagined that that's where I would be, that I would be on the side of the road doing the hokey pokey and winding up in handcuffs and, in the drunk tank.
What I'm really curious about is what changed for you that started you? Because it sounded like the way you described it, that there was kind of a point that all of a sudden it feels like it shifted, or maybe it wasn't all of a sudden, but what changed for you at that point? You said you started drinking and then that ultimately started you down the path.
Yeah.
What happened there?
I don't know if I can really even say I was overwhelmed. But working in community mental health, I was struggling, and frankly, we got to a place where even with everything I was doing, we were at risk of not being able to pay our mortgage, and just that stress just overwhelmed me. And Paul, today, I don't know if that's an excuse, if it was a legitimate catalyst, or if it was just that now it's time for me to go back out. But that's what happened. I got overwhelmed, and I feel like I am such a failure because I couldn't do it right. And so I went back into the business world, and then it was 8 years of increasingly poor decisions from time I was 37 to the time I was 45.
But it sounds like the stress and the pressure mounted. Then there was this pivotal choice that happened. And then it kind of started that next layer of emotions, the embarrassment, the shame,
Right.
all of the things that you talked about. And then it's
Yeah.
like, after a certain point, it's kind of like, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, it became weirdly comfortable to do that, but at the same time, your listeners who may have struggled with recovery or struggled with some of these issues know that you have a beer and the voice is still in the back of your head, and so you have another one because then you've got to try to shut the voice up, right? And my word was excuse, because that was my perfectionism talking.
So there's the double life in terms of how you appear on the outside, right, to the outward world. But I don't think a lot of people really acknowledge and call attention to the fact that you were just talking about, which is there's a double life I'm living inside my own head, because there's a part of me that's drinking or whatever the substance or whatever the outlet is, right? There's a part of me that's doing it because I'm just trying to find comfort and relief and shut the voice up. But there's also a voice that says, this is not who you are. This is not what you want. And so there's a constant daily battle there, right? And I'm just going to do the thing because that's some kind of relief. And yet I know this isn't going to ultimately serve me at the end of the day. And I have to drink a whole lot in order for it to finally be okay. But then it's not okay 12 hours later. And so that double life isn't just what we walk on the streets. It's what's going on in the head.
There were really important fundamental things that I learned and believed working in that community, things that never went away, right? That's part of that conflict, that those things never went away. They were still there.
The second question is, as you look back at the comma that you were sitting on, what did that create for you? I want to also bring us back to, okay, you've just done the hokey pokey on the side of the road. You've got handcuffs, and now you're the person that you spent 7 years trying to support. Where would you like to take us at this point in your story?
I want to take you to the other side of the journey, because that was the turning point for me in my life. That was like, oh my God, how did I get here? I've had the gift of this recovery program and all the different things that were involved in that. How did I get here? And most importantly, how the hell am I going to get out of here? How am I going to change this situation? The bottom line is that I decided that what I really needed to do was find a way to make some changes in my life. And one of the first things I needed to do was get off the road. And it took me a while to do that. It was hard too, because I had to go and address my company and talk about the fact that you send me all over the country to do these projects. And guess what? I just lost my driver's license. And I expected them to fire me, and they supported me. And I never expected it. I expected that I'd go in and I would tell them that, and the next day I'd be looking for a job. And the company that I worked for was a small company, and the two guys that I worked for were retired military officers. And they said, each of us just spent 35 years in the Army, and if you think you're the first person that's come to us that said they made a stupid mistake, then you're making a stupid mistake, right? To think that. They showed me a kind of loyalty that I had ever really experienced.
That had to be a huge relief, given kind of the burden that you were carrying and the stress that you were holding, and as you were disclosing this.
Yep. And one of the really hard parts was that I had to let that company go, because I had to take care of myself, right? And they knew that, and they understood it. They gave me the space and the time to sort it out. Maybe 6 months later, I got a call from the company, and they said, hey, the salesperson in this region left the Texas area. And he said, do you know anybody that might be interested in the job? And I said, well, maybe it's me. And they brought me back in a different role where I had more power. I was managing a region. I was selling. I was working with my clients. And I stayed there for the rest of my career.
Wow.
The time that I'm talking about here, from 1992 to 2007, so I had over 20 jobs. And from 2007 to when I left and retired in 2022, I had one job.
Wow.
When I had my DWI experience, I was like, I've got to change my life. And I made a total change at that point. I mean, I started eating better. I lost 50 pounds. I began to really increase my focus on my health and on running. I went from running those half marathons to running marathons to putting myself through lots of time with myself, lots of training. And then that evolved into doing triathlons. So, instead of just running, you're swimming and you're riding your bike and then you're running. And that ultimately led to an Ironman triathlon. So in 10 years, I went from this 225-pound guy who pounded hamburgers and beers and lived on the road and had this crappy lifestyle to losing 50 pounds and swimming 2.5 miles, then riding my bike for 112, then running a marathon.
Wow.
And that's the journey when my life totally changed.
As you look back at the comma that you were sitting on, what did you learn about yourself?
Oh my gosh. I mean, really, it was learning that I didn't have limits. It was learning that I wasn't a victim of the mistakes I'd made in my past more than anything, right? That it was learning I didn't have to be a victim of failure. Not I sucked because I was sober for 7 years and I went back out. It's today I get a choice to start again. Today I know what I'm going to do to take care of myself, right? And I started to own it, who I was and what was happening in my life. What I've really learned is living my life one day at a time means living my life one day at a time. It means being focused on the present and not being caught up in what I couldn't do or what I didn't do or how I didn't achieve or even how I did. None of that matters. It's all in the past or it's all tomorrow. It's like, how do I squeeze the juice out of what I have today?
You shared, you went through your semicolon moment. That was the start of the turnaround. You started changing. The focus was now on you and taking care of yourself and your health and your well-being. The focus was on putting energy into a new way of being at work, a new type of job, even though it was back with the same company again. The focus was now on things like running, swimming, competing, triathlons, eating, the loss of weight. What would you say is the trait within you that changed?
So when you said that, what came up for me was that I was managing the things that were in my control. What happened in the past wasn't in my control. What I did now and what I planned were things I could control, right? And if I screwed up, I screwed up and I could start again. You have to be consistent. One thing you learn in endurance training is the importance of consistency. No training plan ever goes perfectly, right? And so that's the metaphor is that for me, it was that nothing ever goes perfectly. And that's part of the game, that same resilience crossed over into my life as well, being able to stick it out.
Yeah, I love that. Your story wouldn't be complete if we didn't give you an opportunity to lift up others who matter to you. So who would you like to acknowledge today?
I can't not acknowledge my wife and my life partner, Marcia. We met when we were kids. We got married when we were 22. And, it's been a 40-year journey. We laugh about the fact that our journey started, when we had to buy box pizza crust and macaroni and cheese, and our life has evolved together. She stayed with me through all the time that my life was out of control and I wouldn't be who I am without her love and support, her real partnership.
I appreciate you sharing your story with us today. I look forward to following your journey ahead.
Thank you so much.